for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview. Joining me on Stockbox today, we have the CEO of Premier African Minerals, and that is George Roach. Hi, George.
Hi, and it's good to be chatting to you.
Yes, it's good to be chatting to you. Happy New Year. And I remember last time we spoke, we were talking about the changes at the company and how you're moving on from some of the legacy projects that the company had, acquiring new projects and bringing fresh energy to progress Premier this year. So if we can start with maybe taking a look ahead for 2021, what's in the pipeline? What's going to happen, do you think, George?
Well, I think let me make the point that underlying what we expect to happen is that we have a very clear strategy now that is independent or autonomous from an entire dependence on Zimbabwe and what happens there. Going back in time, our clear and complete focus was on RHA and on Zulu and so on, and that was really where we were mind set. Mm-hmm. At the moment, we've been in a very fortunate position where we can focus on other metals. We retain our positions in Zimbabwe. We expect them to add value, but the ability to look elsewhere, and particularly into the gold space, allows us to broaden that strategy. And I think that is one of the really big changes for this year.
Okay, great. So you refocused your activities. Let's take a look at gold then. With the London markets enjoying the precious metal at the moment, and investors always like to see a little bit of gold in the portfolio. So the company recently acquired additional tenements in Nampula province of Mozambique, known as the Ligonha Gold Project. So building on to the existing in-country assets, what attracts you to Mozambique and why have you chosen this specific project?
Well, the project came to us in a bundle of other tenements and so on that we acquired from an Australian company. Some of the other tenements are in Zimbabwe and they're also prospective. But this one kind of seemed to have been overlooked. Now, fortunately, I have other involvements in Mozambique and have worked quite extensively in Mozambique. So I'm very comfortable within the region. The attraction of this project is that it is being massively worked, and the vicinity is being massively worked by artisanal miners, very successfully as well. And this is always a very good sign. So while we look to expand the size of this tenement, the tenement area is not that big, but we have applications lodged already to expand the size of that tenement. And whilst we look at some other prospective gold areas fairly close by, also in Mozambique, and just wait for the rain, the very wet season at the moment, just to come to an end, which is a couple of months away. We're gearing up and planning to have quite a substantial exploration assault, for want of a better word, into these various properties, and hoping that by that time the additional tenements will be in place. So we know there's gold. We know that it's being extensively exploited by artisanal miners at the moment. And as I say, in the African context, that's often a very good sign indeed. So I think we have a good reason to feel optimistic about those projects.
Okay. And as a seasoned miner, George, where do you feel, or where do you think the gold price or the gold market is? Where do you feel it is now, and where do you feel it is potentially going?
I try to avoid trying to make predictions in terms of where I think it's going to go. But let me make these comments to you. Let me say this, that many of the projects that we are looking at, this in Mozambique is a very good example. These are low capex and potentially very low production cost projects. Mm-hmm. And they are excessively attractive with the gold prices where they are. Okay. But they are the kind of project that once established will weather significant fluctuations in the gold price as well. And that bodes very well, as far as I'm concerned, into the future. The other thing that goes with it is that modern techniques, some changes in milling mechanisms and various other things that are around at the moment are also, in my view, coupled to lower energy costs, going to lead to much lower gold production costs potentially as we go forward, and particularly with the kind of gold project that we're looking at. So whilst I would like to feel strongly bullish on gold, I think that with weakening US currency, and heaven knows where that lot goes after the events of the last week. I mean, I really don't know. Like a movie show, that one. So I'm pretty bullish on gold itself. So I think that, coupled to some of the other comments that I've made, I think gold space, and particularly near surface open pittable kind of stuff, is a hugely attractive space to be in.
Okay, good. So moving on, and when we spoke before, we spoke briefly on Prem completing an investment in 2020, which takes the company's holding in the Chizondo manganese mining project in Namibia up to 19%. So can you explain a little bit more about this project, and why is it core to Premier going forward?
Well, let me start with the last part of that question. For some time, Prem has been saying that we need to have a cash generative project. We'd hoped that this was going to come in the form of RHA, and the issues associated with that are well documented and known. So having something that's cash generative within the company to put us in a situation to at least carry all the overheads and so on associated with being a listed entity, I think is extremely important. The operators of Chizondo made it clear that they would like to have a much closer association with Prem. They've put this one in the public domain on a number of occasions. We hold 19%. I think that I'd very much like to have more, and I hope that we can find a way to conclude a negotiation that will lead to that. But there are various things that need to be done before that can happen. Chizondo needs to prove its profitability. It is not a bad space to be, in my view. Manganese prices have recently improved. I think they're going to be able to achieve what they say they're going to be able to achieve. And I think on that basis that some sort of further and closer tie with Chizondo in the future can't be ruled out and shouldn't be. And it fits in with the overall strategy and so on that we have, that we should have a cash generative business within our portfolio of companies.
Okay. Now let's take a look at some of the legacy projects within the company. And you said before that you believe that they can deliver shareholder value. Do you still believe that to be the case this year, and why?
Okay, the answer to that is yes. I think, and let me give you some examples of why I say yes. And I'm going to start with the Zulu lithium and tantalum project. We did a lot of exploration work on this thing. We did a scoping study. The results were all very good, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we ended up in a situation where our auditors were quite adamant that we needed to impair this. And the principal reasons for impairing at the time, top of the list, was country risk and country risk discount associated with Zimbabwe. And when you factored that into the scoping studies and the projected DCFs, it had a dramatic adverse effect. The other is that lithium prices did drop, spodumene prices reduced quite substantially. I think in more recent times, there's an appreciation of the value of high-grade hard rock spodumene, and the Zulu project has a huge amount of that, and by test work, some very good quality in it as well. Prices are beginning to move back, and my view on Zimbabwe is that I think country risk at some point is going to peak out top and then start being a little bit more sensible in the overall context of where it is in Africa and in relation to other African domains, frankly, a lot of which I think have got bigger country risks associated with them than Zimbabwe. The other thing is that the Zulu area is due to have an EPO granted, we believe. It hasn't been granted yet, but I know of no reason why it shouldn't be granted. Let me say that and let me leave it at that. So those factors combine in regard to Zulu, for example, to say, I believe there's value there and I believe that we're going to achieve it one way or another. Similarly, on the RHA tungsten project, there is some additional test work that is being done. It's long delayed, but it is progressing. And as of close of business end of last year, the crushing side of that additional test work had been completed. And the concentration side is going to proceed starting this week. Now, the potential coming out of that is a restructure of the plant and of the flow sheet that will dramatically reduce the operating cost. I don't want to put finite numbers on it, but it's going to cut OPEX by more than 50% on the plant side. And allied to that are discussions with our off-taker and other potential parties as well, to the extent that should this test work stand up to independent valuation, the independent consulting engineers are appointed already to look at it, that the off-takers will provide finance to bring the underground operations back into production. Now, hanging over this is still this NEEF historic ownership issue, which remains unresolved. But if it's going to be unresolved, and we're still going to be sitting with a greater than $20 million loan account that needs to be repaid in hard currency, and the plant is ours, and we have a plant operating agreement, and we have an off-taker who's funded this thing back into production, and it can generate some profit operating, well, again, I think that also goes to potential to add some value back into the company through the Zimbabwean assets. And there's some other Zimbabwean assets as well. But I think those are the two main ones.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So there's lots going on across the business, and a sort of a new focus on driving success. Let's just finish with maybe a message. What message could you give to shareholders or indeed those interested in Prem at this point?
Well, I think the thing to focus on are the differences between Prem last year and Prem this year. Mm-hmm. And let's start off by just noting that Prem is a debt-free entity with some cash in the bank as well. Now, that's a big change from where we have been. Through all the holding in terms of Zulu and RHA and the Zimbabwean situation, we had accumulated a huge amount of debt. That's kind of all gone at the moment. Secondly, is the fact that our strategy is now a strategy that is not totally dependent on resolving everything in Zimbabwe. And the resolution of the issues in Zimbabwe get put into the upside pot more than necessarily the basic sustainable pot of Prem. And Prem's strategy takes us into some of these new gold licenses in that direction on the one side and possible cash generative asset on the other. So the strategy in its own right is a cause for the optimism that I start to feel again coming back into Prem.
Okay, well, George Roach, the CEO of Premier African Minerals, thank you very much for your time.
It's only a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this Stockbox interview. For more information, interviews and videos, visit our website at stockboxmedia.com or give us a follow on Twitter by searching @StockboxMedia.